I've been tiptoeing around a prediction for the Cleveland Browns this year. I'm not suggesting it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and put it in pen. We're going to get to it here. The latest Locked On Browns. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith. Thanks, everybody, for being along for the ride.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on ELOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Joined today, Sports Illustrated, Browns Digest, Pete Smith, at _Pete Smith_. Fantastic content daily over at Browns Digest on SportsIllustrated.com. Make sure it is a part of the rotation. Today's episode of Locked On Browns is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnNFL, no space, all caps, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Always thankful to the great sponsors of the Locked On Podcast Network. Bird Dogs, obviously, back here for another spell. The clothes, fantastic. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. As I mentioned, and, you know, anybody follows me, I've been tiptoeing around this one here. And now starting to see minicamp here the last couple of days. And the emphasis that this team has shown in newly acquired wide receiver, third-year player Elijah Moore, former New York Jet. Pete, I'm taking it from pencil. I'm taking it off the whiteboard. We're going Sharpie. Elijah Moore will lead the Cleveland Browns in receptions in the 2023 season.
Well, no. And look, you fall into the trap. They don't have pads on. Like, this is like, who's the 7th round receiver? Calvin Austin, the Steelers' little sprightly wide receiver that was tearing up minicamp and then immediately disappeared when pads came on. And look, I think Elijah Moore's going to be really good for the Browns. I do. Obviously, you and I have been a fan of his since college, and I think he's going to have a good year. But I still think Amari Cooper is your dude, and he keeps showing you. I mean, he had the day off today after practicing yesterday, but he's still
that'll be a theme for the summer. It'll be a day on and a day off, most likely for
absolutely. Amari. And look, they were really happy with what they saw from like guys like Cedric Tillman and stuff like that, which is great. Get those guys reps. But look, I mean, I think it's possible you could be right on receptions. I don't think you'll be right on yards.
That's fine.
Maybe that's
to clarify. I am more than okay with that. But go ahead.
Okay, maybe and you've got a shot there just by virtue of if the Browns offense works like it intended and has DPJ still on it, they're going to create a whole lot of space. They're just going to force teams to cover the entire field, which is what the Buffalo Bills have done, which is what the Kansas City Chiefs did when they had Tyreek Hill, not so much lately. Is you have to cover every blade of grass on the field. And if you can't do that, you're going to get beat. And you're already seeing that in just these little highlights. You're seeing Deshaun Watson air it out and throw deep. And then you're seeing him take easy little underneath passes that have space and let a guy like Elijah Moore thrive. So from that standpoint, yes, I'm not going to say he will lead the team in receptions. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I do think it's it's a possibility just by virtue of what he does. And to his credit, he's crushing it. If you've listened to him talk since he's the happiest man on the planet. There are 3 people that are super positive in everything they do on this team right now: David Njoku, Juan Thornhill, and Obo Okoronkwo. And yet Elijah Moore, when he talks, like it was on with Nathan Zagura, loving life.
I will scold you for not having the opportunity to slip a Jersey joke in there. That is bad on you. -1, Pete Smith. Go sit in the corner. Look, I think the thing is with Elijah Moore is there's just so much you can do with him. And look, we've already kind of got a glimpse, and I think the Browns truly understand the impact he can bring, but whether it's yak ability. And look, keep in mind, he is a 4-3 guy. So when Pete talks about, challenging every blade of grass, you're not having other people do this to create opportunities for Elijah Moore. He can certainly do that himself as well. 4-3, it speaks for himself. But I do think it's, coming in here aggravated. And twice aggravated essentially by the Jets. The quarterback play that never worked out, maybe even 3 times, obviously, and as Pete and I talked about, basically, after a short amount of time switching his position for Garrett Wilson's. And look, the Jets probably weren't wrong maybe on that one. It was a really tough spot to be in because they doubled up on wide receivers, and it didn't necessarily, eventually one of them was going to be upset. And of course, the third one is that, when it became apparent that Aaron Rodgers was going to be a part of the New York Jets, the Jets basically, for Elijah Moore, I'm sure for a quick, brief second was like, oh man, thank God, this is all I've been waiting for in my time here. And then to find out, now we're going to move on because, again, Aaron has his own people. So he comes in here absolutely motivated. And we may say this, but look, in year 3, only a 4-year deal. His eyes probably are on a second contract already. And I just think there are so many easy things, whether it's screens, like I talked about, the shotgun, basically forward handoff that they were, count as a reception. And exactly, but it counts as a reception, Pete. Yeah. And we're going to make sure it counts as a reception. Absolutely.
Listen, but I just think I had a quarterback who wanted that to be a fixture of our offense to improve his passing yards.
First things first, smart young man, very, very smart young man. And I wonder how he's doing these days. So now that keeps going on. And then the thing is look, to this point, still, if you're the defense, the draw and the number one option that you got to basically try to take away is Amari Cooper. And with a player like Deshaun Watson, look, Amari will still get his. It's not like, he's not what he ever was. He's still Amari Cooper. But, Deshaun Watson's going to be like, that's fine. You want to take that away. I've got option B. I've got option C. And we'll work with that. I just think it's going to set up. And no, is it going to be yardage? No. And it probably won't even be touchdowns. But I think overall receptions, and, if you tell me Coop takes the other 2, I probably, 100% totally agree with that. Touchdowns can get a little wonky, obviously. But, I just think the path is going to be there. And, whatever the number might be, I think Amari had 77 last year. So you figure Amari would be in that range this year. I think 17-game season, I think you can find a way, manufacture a lot of targets that could lead to Elijah Moore catching more than 80 passes this year for this team.
Sure. I mean, it's possible. And I wouldn't surprise me if he gets a bunch of touchdowns, if it's like that
it's going to be like the McDonald's challenge all over again. You're going to hold it
some of the stuff that you saw like the Chiefs do in the Super Bowl in the red zone. But yeah, I mean, and we're still waiting for the to pay off on that challenge that you said you could knock out in an hour.
As soon as we find the health insurance rep to sign off on that. We're getting older here these days. And I apologize to anybody if the voice is off today here. A lot of smoke in the air here. Literal smoke, by the way. Absolute literal smoke. So that is my first bold declaration for the 2023 season. Number 8, the Ocho, Elijah Moore, will lead the Cleveland Browns in receptions in 2023. We're going to get to the defensive side of the ball here. Look, we've seen a lot of success from the offense the last couple of days. The question is this basically, letting the defense understand maybe what needs to be worked on? Or is it maybe getting, lining up what definitely needs to be worked on, of course, when late July, mid-July, even this year, comes around for the Cleveland Browns. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen. Make sure you're subscribed on the YouTube channel. Look, bird dogs make you look good. Bird dog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts. They are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird dogs fix this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you can get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird dogs uses anti-stink, sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Look, I love my Bird Dogs gear. The problem is I can never find it. If teenagers appreciate it, it's a good product. And even when it gets out of the laundry, it usually ends up in my wife's drawer before it ends up in mine. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. Enter promo code LockedOnNFL, all caps, no space, for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. Continuing here, Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. And again, for all the everydayers who make Locked On Browns their first listen, of course, you guys are the fabric on which this show is built. And for all the new traffic coming through, be like the everydayer, subscribe to the YouTube channel, put your notifications on Locked On Browns. When the content drops, you all are there to consume it. Audio-wise, Locked On Browns, always available, always free wherever you get your podcasts. Pete, the defense. And look, again, 100%. The biggest takeaway from this is there should not be any major takeaways. The offense should look better. Nobody is getting lit up. The quarterback is not getting rushed. And for the defense, Pete, this would be something where I think there would maybe be a little bit more concern if we're talking the 2017 roster, the 2018 roster. Maybe early 2020. But this defense is getting a very stiff test. They're getting a very solid look at, look, we talk about it. Who's the best running back in the AFC North? Nick Chubb. Maybe the best running back in the AFC, maybe the entire best running back in the NFL. So you get to go against that competition. Amari Cooper speaks for himself. Rising young players in Donovan Peoples-Jones and Elijah Moore. We all know the type of player David Njoku is. We all know the type of quarterback that Deshaun Watson can be. So for the Browns, this is the ultimate test. I mean, their defensive side of the ball for Jim Schwartz here, you're getting to see players on the level of the talent you're going to try to go and beat week in, week out. So it kind of helps you how you can stagger all this and just get some initial looks, some initial feels. And, for all the talk that we get on Jim Schwartz's defense is simple. It allows to add the creative when he's going to need it, but trying to get an idea here of what his athletes look like against other plus athletes.
Well, look, I mean, for one thing, the Browns offense is talented. The second part is there's no pads, and that limits what you can do on defense. And Jim Schwartz has said without saying, they need pads to do anything, really. But so it changes what you focus on in minicamp. So now you're focusing on specifically technique in terms of certain man coverages or whatever else, communication, those type of things. You're limited in what you can do at this point. You can compete, but you're still limited. So it just changes what the focus is and what you're trying to learn. And what that does likely gives the offense a further advantage. I think the defense is going to benefit in the long run, but we've got to get to that point where the pads are on and we can see what they're doing. Now, hopefully they don't kill each other in the process, but that is what you want to have happen. You want to see these guys challenging everybody. Look at a guy like Jedrick Wills. You want him challenged by Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett and Okoronkwo and all these other guys to make him the best player he can be. Likewise, you want the mix of receivers that the Browns have to challenge the various corners the Browns have and their safeties and linebackers and all those things. So, look, I mean, you want to get to a point, and that's when training camp happens, where the defense wins a day and then the offense comes back and wins the next day or whatever. There's a little bit more back and forth in competition where guys are making plays and making each other better. In minicamp and where we're at this point, like one of the clips that they called the completion was like a 7-second scramble. It would, even 7-on-7 rules, it wouldn't have called a sack. Now, I still thought the play was useful. You saw Marquise Goodwin sort of duck back to the pylon and fight the right spot, and Deshaun Watson hit him for a pass, but it's a sack, and the defense won that play, even though, it looks good on the tape. So there's other aspects of it where right now we're going to say every pass in the red zone is complete, and it looks great, and that's fine. Given what the Browns are dealing with at this point, it's all about Deshaun Watson looking the part. It's all about these new weapons looking the part. And while certainly we want to see where the defense is getting better, we're going to have to be patient and wait until July.
And one of the takeaways from that, though, is, look, even in a 7-on-7 drill, 11-on-11 drill, sometimes you don't want to blow that whistle because it's really, really hard to replicate and use as a drill to create the scramble drill. You just truly can't do that. So sometimes, and look, everybody knows, and I'm sure Jim Schwartz, okay, sure. All right. Yeah. Because in all actuality, you would never want your quarterback running around for 7 seconds with the ball in his hand anywhere near the pocket, because guess what? He's going to eventually find his way on a beeline with a player who has a clear, uninvaded path, and most likely he did not see him. And guess what? It's over. Good night. But Pete, this also brings up, this is important, because if the defense, with the new defensive coordinator, a lot of new players involved, if the Browns offense wasn't doing anything right now, and you think some of these questions right now from the media are difficult and maybe, I don't want to say not appropriate, but they just don't seem to line up, because these guys just don't fall for it anymore. If they don't want to give you the gimme answer that you're hoping for to write your work, you're going to get a 2-word answer. But this would be all hellfire and brimstone, Pete, if the offense was not looking good right now.
No, and that's the point. Like, we're in the stage where if the offense is functioning, that's what's supposed to happen. Like, it means you did your job. But if they fail, obviously it's a huge deal. Now, the thing I do think is becoming a thing right now is the excitement is pretty palpable, not just by players, but by media. I think they're going to have a difficult time keeping the lid on this thing, and expectations are going to start rising. I think the players have a better sort of mindset on this than media does. If you listen to Deshaun Watson, and like Nick Chubb is always Nick Chubb, their big focus is on day-to-day, take care of what needs to be done today. Joe Bitonio was asked about this, and he's like, look, I've heard what the Browns are supposed to do for years. We've got to go out and do it. So look, they have to, that has to be the mindset, but it's undoubtedly the case, especially with these new guys who came in, which again, I'm all for it. I want them to be excited. I want them to be happy to be here, because that energy is going to be valuable in August. But obviously you have to sort of focus on what's important now. At least for the moment, they seem to be doing that, and it's been good.
No question about it. And you just want to, see the growth here. And the fact that everybody is kind of getting involved here. Everybody is finding a way to contribute. And again, Jalen Darden, this is a name we brought up here in the second day in a row. This is a player that, probably has a snowball's chance in hell of making this roster. But you see, and this is what you see of it, is the system now. The system seems to be in place. So even still, you're talking about guys 6th, 7th, 8th on the depth chart with a no chance whatsoever to make this roster are finding ways to contribute, because the system basically, and the play calling, the line, everything is working. It's humming. And now that you look at all of this with plus athletes, much better talent all around, and the work that's been done here, Browns are going to have five out of 6 wide receivers in that room, most likely on this final roster, 53 for week 1, that are either going to be in the first or second year with this franchise. And it's yeoman's work. But again, when you invest $238 million guaranteed in a quarterback, you better make damn sure you've got everything you need for that man to succeed. And for Andrew Berry, that has certainly been the focus. That has certainly been the effort. And we'll see if it comes to fruition, obviously, starting in September. We're going to continue on here, your latest Locked On Browns. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, Browns Digest, SportsIllustrated.com. Appreciate you guys for being along for the ride. As always, the everydayers, I cannot thank you guys enough. The traffic that you guys bring here and the traffic that you bring leads to more traffic being brought here. You wouldn't be more like the everydayers. You make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. And the best way to do that is by having your notifications on and being subscribed to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. So when the content drops, it shows right up. Always free, always available. Any podcast app where you get your podcast app. That's just the way it works here. Again, thank you, everybody. Pete, now, if we're going to stick here, obviously with some thoughts here on the defense, and, look, again, they should be taking their lumps right now. And I'm sure that's probably part of the reason why a guy like Myles Garrett is, all right, well, tell me and define which ones are mandatory, and those will be the ones that I choose to attend. But Pete, we went through this, and we went through this in, 2020, obviously, and there was this wasn't a defense based on a lot of talent. At the time, we had a lot of faith, obviously, in Joe Woods and maybe what his system could do, and it started to come around. 21 started kind of slow, but then it really picked up momentum as there was more talent involved. 2022, obviously, everything just went right down, right down the sinkhole, so to speak here. But what, Pete, with a defense is probably the most difficult part to develop? What is the part that takes the most work to make it everything 11, and then obviously factor in nickel package, dime package? What is the biggest factor in getting and making sure that your defense basically grows and everybody starts to play in harmony?
Well, I think that's it. It's that harmony aspect. And obviously the easiest thing to point to in that regard is coverage, because if you're doing things that rely on communication or checks or whatever, you have to be able to do that. But I would extend that to run fits, and making sure that all the gaps are covered appropriately and people are where they're supposed to be, so you don't create gaping running lanes that allow, big plays, which, the New England Patriots game last year stands out in that regard. But that's the element. It's so much of what you can do defensively is practicing individual skills, but you have to be able to sync that up with how that's going to work when you come together, and how that's going to work on Sundays when the bullets are flying and everything else, is to make sure that everybody's on the same page, everybody's working like clockwork, which is why continuity can be beneficial. But I mean, that's the challenge for the Browns, is they have brought in more players. They are changing schemes, so they've got a little bit more to work on, but at the same time, things are a little bit simpler in terms of what they're being asked to do in an effort to play faster. And then you're going to put more on the defensive line in terms of what they can do. So yeah, I mean, it's that finding that right harmony, getting guys to play at the right speed, having guys understand that, this is where I'm going to be when covering my zone or filling a gap or whatever, and figuring out that timing.
Well, Pete, no, so look, Jim Schwartz is no dummy. Obviously he's been around this for a long time, and he's had successful defenses with Tennessee Titans, Detroit Lions, Buffalo Bills, obviously the Philadelphia Eagles, now here, first year with the Cleveland Browns. Part of this is you look at this and you say, hey, Denzel Ward, former number 1 pick, Greg Newsome, former number 1 pick, Martin Emerson, obviously, where he was drafted, probably you look back, you're going to redraft that, probably goes higher. So Darius Smith, his legacy in this league. Miles Garrett, obviously his legacy in this league. Dalvin Tomlinson, obviously his legacy in this league to this point. Sometimes, and you hear the players talking, it's simple, and that's good. And look, I got bad news for y'all. It's going to get a little more complex. He's going to bring a little more to you. But Pete, part of this is let the athletes athlete. You know what I'm saying? And this is kind of what you go back to that Jet game last year. And there's so much talk afterwards and the ensuing days afterwards, after such a demoralizing, soul-crushing loss, about communication. Well, I don't care what kind of communicator Denzel Ward is, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, Dalvin Tomlinson, Miles Garrett, Zadarius Smith. Just let these guys go do what they do. Nobody here, look, it's not about communicating. Dude, I'm going to put you in the best situation to succeed. Just go do what you do. I'm not worried about the communication. That's why I'm going to keep it simple. I want you to know what your assignment is and go out there and be the star football player that we think you are.
Yeah, that's the delicate balance of you want to be complicated enough that you don't give it away to the opponent, but at the same time you don't want to overcoach. You don't want it to prevent guys from being who they are, and they just play football. And the old adage, "You think you stink," is true. You want guys to just react and go, and the more that you can do, that's fine. And ultimately, you get into a point where you're saying, look, if you can beat my dudes doing what they do best, you win. You earned it. And I think there is something to that. Whereas if you get too caught up in trying to fool the other team, occasionally you fool your own guys. Certainly we saw that happen last year, and that's not an excuse for the players, because they got to do their job and they didn't. But that is something that it becomes a potential hazard in those situations.
No question about it. And now there was a talking point today, and questions asked as far as maybe Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb's maybe production dropping a little bit when Deshaun Watson came back. At that point, look, the Browns were trying to do everything they can to just get Deshaun Watson whatever work he was going to need for the remainder of the season, understanding that most likely it was the opportunity was essentially lost because the Browns were going to have to go perfect, maybe with some help here. But Pete, to think that there's a thought process here where number 4 and number 24 aren't as important to each other as, Deshaun's relationship with Cooper, Donovan, obviously, Elijah Moore again. And then, the offensive line, which is obviously so impactful to what Nick Chubb does, should be so impactful to what Deshaun Watson does. It's still probably the theory of the two most important players on this Browns offense are number 4 and number 24. 4 is supposed to make 24's life a hell of a lot easier, and the threat of 24 should make number 4's life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways they can go about it. If they want to go spread teams out and potentially limit the amount of players that can play in the box, that's one way to potentially allow Nick Chubb to get more running room and create more plays. The other is the fact that Deshaun Watson can be part of the running game, and whether it's read plays or whatever, as long as the opponent has to worry about the potential for Watson's legs, that's potentially one less defender that's looking at Chubb. So yeah, look, the goal is always to grow the pie rather than thinking about, well, I only have so many yards or touches or whatever. Grow the pie. Then you don't need as many touches. And you're still getting that production. So between the Commanders game last year and the Steelers finale, Nick Chubb touched the ball, I think 32 times for 146 total yards. Sign me up. Give me more of that. Because it averages
the math there. I want to do the math there. Yeah.
It averages out to 7.4 yards per touch. And you compare that to the previous month where he had 21 carries, 24 carries. And it was for 99 or 92 yards, or the Bengals game where he just ran into a wall for 34 rushing yards.
DJ Reader was an absolute beast.
Yeah. I mean, touches are great. Carries are nice, but you ultimately want to make him the most successful he can be. And look, if Nick Chubb can get the ball and he's already passed 4 guys, it's a whole lot easier for him to operate, and he's not going to get hit as much, which is what everybody should want. Because as much as we want Nick Chubb to have a great season, and I do believe he's got the potential to have a career year, it does you no good if he's gassed in January, if he's completely run, and we saw this, part of the law, people forget. They're looking back at his the end of the year and they're going, what's happened? Well, he was hurt. His foot was injured. He was, he played through it because that's what he does. But we don't want him to be in that situation where now he's dragging himself to the playoffs. How many years has Derrick Henry dragged into the playoffs and then just not looked very good? And some of that's injury and some of that's just fatigue. You want him to be fresh. So the less touch, as long as the offense is effective, you should be rooting for fewer touches. Now, you still want yards, no question. But as I said, you got 114 against the Commanders. You got 122 against the Steelers. And it was, combined 32 touches. That's a dream scenario where you're getting 16 touches per game and you're well over 100 yards.
And let's all not forget that his welcome to the NFL moment was 3 carries for 114 yards against the Las Vegas, then Oakland Raiders in 2018. That's when
That's the one time where you're going, why is he not getting the ball more?
Yep. And it still took another 6 weeks and for somebody to step in and to trade Carlos Hyde to the Jacksonville Jaguars to actually get the opportunity to see more of Nick Chubb. Wild, wild stuff, folks. The John Dorsey years. He is Pete Smith, Browns Digest, SportsIllustrated.com. Pete and his team, they do a fantastic job. You give you great content day in, day out. One of my favorite places to go to for Browns content. The guys, Pete and his team over there, just, again, they continue to crush it. They've been great with every angle, off field. Obviously, some unfortunate things to discuss here the last couple of days. Of course, as on field mandatory training camp going on here as well. Make sure you're following at _Pete Smith _ myself, your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff _LJ _Lloyd. 7th year here with Locked On Browns, Cleveland Browns coverage. You're all an insane group and slightly kind of crazy, and I love it because I feel like I truly kind of fit in here with all of you from that respect. So thank you all for being a part of it. To the everydayers, again, first listen every single day. Locked On Browns. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure your notifications are on. Audio-wise, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, my ladies and gentlemen, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.
Oh, that's funny.